When it comes to consequences, we are supposed to be knowing the endocrine consequences and metabolic consequences. This is mandatory because your guidelines, NMC guidelines, CBME wants you to be familiar with this. But we are not going to stop there alone. The consequences are extremely profound, so we are going to touch upon those topics as well, people. But our first focus is about endocrine and metabolic consequences. When it comes to endocrine, the endocrine aspect of obesity and the endocrine consequence of obesity is what is called as metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is not something new, it is not something very far and distant from obesity. Every time an obese patient develops metabolic consequences, we term those patients as suffering from metabolic syndrome, guys. So at the outset, you need to know what is metabolic syndrome, when do you call someone as suffering from metabolic syndrome, and when do you call someone as just obese and not metabolic syndrome. Alright. In order to recognize, in order to understand what is metabolic syndrome, out of these 5 criterias, minimum of 3 has to be met, minimum of 3, and more than 3 is going to be more or less definite to be calling someone as having metabolic syndrome, guys. And what are all the factors that to get diagnosed with metabolic syndrome? First thing first, it is going to be central obesity. There are multiple names for it: abdominal obesity, visceral obesity, alright, central obesity. These are all synonymous names. When it comes to obesity, how do you classify that, or how do you say that this is the normal obesity and this is something that is actually causing metabolic syndrome? We measure this with waist circumference. I repeat, this is not hip circumference, people, this is waist circumference. Waist is something where thorax ends and abdomen begins, right? So if you can see in a mirror and you can understand the end of thorax and where abdomen begins. That's the curvature, alright. So that point of end of thorax and the point of beginning of abdomen is what is called as waist, doctors. And waist circumference is the clear-cut value to say whether it is metabolic syndrome or not. What are you seeing in this table? When it comes to Indians and South Asians, that includes Indians, Sri Lankans, Maldives people, Lakshadweep people, Andaman Nicobar Islands people, we are all South Asians, right? When it comes to South Asians, the values are going much lower. When it comes to waist circumference, for males, 90 centimeter of waist is considered as metabolic syndrome. For females, 80 centimeters of waist is being considered as metabolic syndrome. Please be clear with the value. 102 and 88 is for international subjects, European patients and American patients. For South Asian men, it is going to be 90 centimeters. For South Asian women, it is going to be 80 centimeters. Please make a correction in the value. Many of the international textbooks use the value for European subjects and American subjects. Let's be clear. When it comes to Indian population, it is 90 centimeter for male, it is for females. So that point and above that 90 or 80 centimeters for both the gender will be considered as metabolic syndrome. Why are we giving so much of importance to this one word, metabolic syndrome? Because obesity alone is not a big deal. For example, you take up a sumo wrestler, a Japanese sumo wrestler, morbid obesity. Are they unhealthy? No. Reason? They are developing obesity generalized manner. Right from head to foot they will be obese. That kind of adipocytes are getting deposited under the skin. They are developing subcutaneous obesity. But people like us who are thin built, who are moderately built, we develop belly, right? So that is the prime factor, people. It is not about the fat, it's the culprit, or it's the reason behind all the heart attack, pancreatitis. It is not just the fat. But the question is, where the fat is located? Is it beneath the skin or is it in the abdominal cavity? If the answer is beneath the skin, the subject is free from danger, he doesn't have to worry about anything. If the distribution, if the placement of fat is abdominal cavity, now that is something the subject has to be seriously concerned with, because that is a marker of ill health. Alright, so please remember, point number 1 is going to be central obesity, people.